Greetings, everyone. I want to welcome everybody to Focus on Western Islamism's inaugural podcast. We are speaking with Hannah Baldock, one of the most indefatigable writers. She's been doggedly writing about Islamism in the United Kingdom, and she's done some tremendous on-the-scene reporting. Hannah is a former research fellow for the Center for Radicalisation and Terrorism at the Henry Jackson Society and a regular contributor to Focus on Western Islamism, the Daily Telegraph, the Spectator, and Spiked. Can you give people just a brief description of how you got into the dismal subject of Islamism in the United Kingdom?
I got into looking into Islamism around 2017 when we had a succession of terror attacks here in the UK, the Manchester Arena bombing at the Ariana Grande concert and attacks around London Bridge on a Friday evening when people were having drinks after work in the summer, and another one on Westminster Bridge. It just coincided with quite a large influx of exiled Arabs arriving in West London around 2011 onwards. And there were obviously lots of dynamics at play there, but quite a large number of Egyptian and Syrian exiled families arrived in West London. There always has been quite a large Arab population, but there is quite a hub of Islamist-oriented media organizations, including Al Arabi was set up as a new TV channel after the Arab Spring to kind of cater for that constituency. There's quite a lot of charities as well. So there's quite a lot to there's
And
quite
you
a lot
had
to
worked as a reporter before all of this happened.
I had been a foreign correspondent in South America, another fascinating region. There I learned a lot about demagoguery, populism, crazy socialist projects, and a lot of which there's quite some crossover with Islamist political maneuvers and goals. So some of my research is transferable, but a lot of it is new.
You've been pretty aggressive and disciplined in your coverage of Tower Hamlets. Can you tell people what's going on there?
Tower Hamlets really is the kind of petri dish for how Islamism can mobilize voters behind certain candidates and take over boroughs or cities wholesale, or possibly larger electoral districts. The classic Italian philosophers always say an organized minority can easily dominate a disorganized majority. And of course, it just so happens Tower Hamlets is particular in that it has one of the largest Muslim populations of any borough in the UK. It's 39% Muslim. I think about 34.5 of those are of Bangladeshi origin. The social and religious hub of that community is a very large and well-funded mosque, the East London Mosque, which just happens to have been set up by exiled members of exiled Bangladeshi Islamist factions who fled their homeland after the 1971 War of Independence, which they lost. Obviously, migrations of peoples will change the ethnic makeup of districts, and voters of different backgrounds will have different priorities, and they will want to see their interests reflected and themselves represented. No one's arguing with that. It's just it's the method and the means. An electoral court judgment in 2015 and successive government interventions in the borough since Lutfur Rahman came into ascendancy have proven that it has been by foul means that he has been elected. The people he's appointed, the contracts he's awarded, the housing allocations, there have just been a welter of allegations of fraud and malfeasance, some of which have been hard to evidence, and that's why the police have failed repeatedly in their duty to enforce electoral law and also public accounting law. Is a real bugbear of the opposition. There's 8 opposition councillors. They have now won 33 out of 45.
Now, one of the interesting things is that you mentioned earlier the East London Mosque, and in the end of 2024, I actually went into that mosque for afternoon prayers. The interesting thing is that if I had known everything that you had documented for our writing about the East London Mosque and your coverage of Tower Hamlets, I'm not sure I would have set foot in the mosque.
They play their cards very, very skillfully, really. Once the American ambassador under Barack Obama, Louis Sussman visited. Prince Charles opened the London Muslim Centre, which is really, and that was funded with funding from the EU and from the London Development Agency. It's partially publicly funded building, which reports later suggested is actually used as a base for the IFE, the Islamic Forum of Europe, which is alleged to be a front for the Jamaat Islami, which is the network which is responsible for mobilizing the vote largely behind Rahman, and the Tower Hamlets Council of Mosques is based there. And there's Maulana Shamsul Haq was named in the electoral court judgment against Rahman. He's the chair of the Tower Hamlets Council of Mosques. He's a sort of Bengali elder, and he is very much a sort of a rallying figure. He's very revered as a sort of Muslim community leader and elder, and he was accused of working hand in glove with Rahman at 2014 election, which was declared null and void. But the East London Mosque, Prince William and Kate visited. They obviously do a lot of social and welfare outreach work. When the COVID pandemic was on, they were extremely busy delivering food parcels to the elderly and doing their good works. And they have a very organised network for all that sort of things. But on the flip side, as used paper in 2019 by the Commission for Countering Extremism, Mainstreaming Islamism, said the trouble with engaging with and legitimising institutions like the East London Mosque is that the cordon sanitaire around institutions that host extremists, which have included in the past hardline pro-caliphate Salafist types, Haitham al-Haddad, Ismail Menk from Zimbabwe. The Islamic Forum of Europe notoriously hosted a talk by video link from Anwar al-Awlaki. They always claimed that they didn't know, they didn't do the booking, or they didn't know that what he was going to say, or they didn't think at the time he was an extremist, despite that he was linked to multiple terror plots thereafter in the UK and the US, obviously. Methinks they just protest too much, about never being aware of the extremist positions of any of these.
And I want to encourage our listeners to actually read Hannah's articles on our website, which can be seen at Middle East Forum /FWI. One of the things is that people are going to say, okay, so Lutfur Rahman, he's a corrupt politician, but a lot of politicians are corrupt. I live in the city of Boston that it was at one time led by a guy by the name of James Michael Curley, who was as corrupt as they come. He was an Irish Catholic politician that used grievance to stay in power to a lot and a certain amount of populism, but he didn't derive his support from people who wanted to fundamentally change how Western democracy operates. Do you think that that's one of the things that the people at the East London Mosque are interested in, or when they support extremists? Because people like Curley might have supported a certain level of corruption, but there's an ideological component to this, isn't there?
Absolutely. That is why they are so highly organized and so highly motivated. I mean, they do think they are doing God's work, and it's a quid pro quo. The Tower Hamlets Council of Mosques received a £250,000 contract for mosque engagement after they helped Lutfur Rahman get re-elected in 2022. The East London Mosque itself has had, by 2011, it had already had up to approaching 3 million of public funding. It's built on council land. It started off as a couple of porter cabins, but it's expanded with public money and private donations. But residents of the borough, it's a very young and growing population. The Bangladeshi Muslim population of the borough, 14% of them were born outside of the UK. They're born in Bangladesh. They probably don't even remember the previous corruption scandals around Rahman, which started sort of more than 10 years ago. The electoral court judgment was now more than 10 years ago. Rahman very much caters to the youth vote. So he is spending 13 million a year on youth provisions. He's got 20 new youth centres that he's built. Well, you may say, well, great, wonderful to keep the youth off the streets and keep them productive. But residents notice that 12 hours a week is taken up with Arabic classes or Quran Arabic classes. and sisters groups, which are obviously Muslim-only sisters groups. They were very active during the pro-Gaza protests and organising around that. They noticed that things in the borough start to change, whether it's segregated leisure facilities, segregated swimming, and also that more and more mosques keep appearing. And a lot of times on council land, there's a mosque called the Mellish Street Mosque that was built on council land. It was started as a community centre. That's usually the pattern, is that agreements with developers, because obviously Tower Hamlets is a wealthy borough. It hosts Canary Wharf, which is a major financial centre in the UK. It generates about 40 billion of GDP and 12 billion of tax receipts. It has a lot of land and it's sort of ripe for regeneration. But as one councillor told me, that where this Mellish Street Mosque was built, you could have built 40 flats. It was a bomb site, but it was a community centre that was turned into a mosque at a cost of £8 million. That pattern sort of seems to replicate across the borough. Obviously, the borough will change with the demographic changes, but it's this quid pro quo that residents observe between the mosque which mobilised the votes. There's a big article in the Left Lane where a Bangladeshi Muslim contributor wrote an open letter to Jeremy Corbyn. So Jeremy Corbyn appeared in the campaign videos for Lutfur Rahman. He is the former leader of the Labour Party who left scandals about anti-Semitism in the party, which he said were exaggerated, but they weren't. He is now sitting as a pro-Gaza independent MP for Islington North. He's backed Rahman all the way. In fact, Rahman appointed Jeremy Corbyn's former chief of staff, Amy Jackson, and Harry Murphy, some of his campaign staff, Rahman appointed.
So for people outside of the United Kingdom, they're going to say, we know that Lutfur Rahman has established a fiefdom, and he's done it with the support of Islamists from the local Muslim community, and some of them have ties to the Jamaat-e-Islami movement, and that they are hostile to the principles of Western democracy, and that they're using a combination of Islamism and socialism and grievance politics to achieve power. What's this going to do to the Labour Party, and what's it going to do to British politics in general?
Even Bengali voices are saying that the party that Rahman has founded, Aspire, is what political scientists call a clientelist machine. It's got no functioning membership democracy. Decisions are made by its leader and a small cadre of advisors. It's not a healthy development for democracy to have parties that are run like that and who don't vet their candidates. One of the candidates for councillor ahead of this last election was suspended for expressing admiration for Adolf Hitler and calling the Holocaust a holohoax. And traditionally, in a two-party system or three that the UK has had historically, you've relied on those big brand parties to vet candidates for probity and whether they're suitable for public office. The Policy Exchange think tank has done 2 papers recently about Islamopopulism. When you have in the north of England, in Birmingham, they had an ex-terrorist was running to be a councillor in Birmingham. I mean, that was widely discussed in the press before the elections. I mean, he wasn't elected, but the fact that he still stood is pretty alarming. We've got this outfit, the Muslim Vote, which was founded in December 2023, really to kind of capitalize on the wave of anti-Israel anger and, by extension, anger with the Labour and the Conservatives for not doing anything to stop the prosecution of Israel's war in Gaza. The Muslim Vote saw an opportunity to harness those votes. It is going to lead to the balkanization of British politics. The Labour Party has hemorrhaged votes to these independents, whether at local level, like to Lutfur Rahman's Aspire Party. There are other mayoralties that are also up for grabs. And there's the West Midlands mayoralty was almost won by a guy who said he'd been sent by Allah to fight Zionism and the elites that are controlled by Zionism.
Right. So a regular political party would disqualify somebody with a history of corruption.
Obviously, it's not the only party that's had trouble with its candidates. The effect of the rise of a so-called Islamopopulism is that it triggers support for parties that are further right, like the Reform Party, Restore Britain, all of these parties that want to deal more firmly with mass migration, illegal immigration, Islamism, the ones that are less conciliatory and want to take more hardline starts against these types of forces. Reform has also had great trouble with its candidates. It's had some bad apples, and parties will have bad apples. But with Aspire, it feels like we've imported wholesale this political culture from Bangladesh, which is based on kin and clan and religious networks. And it's not really even trying to be accountable in the usual way.
So that's a very good point to make. I don't know if you've seen the response to this movie called Citizen Vigilante, which was broadcast on X. It's basically about a vigilante that engages in terrible acts of violence against immigrants and judges that are seen as lenient on their behalf.
Rahman, he's always maintained that the electoral court judgment against him was motivated. Sour grapes and bad losers. The fact that he's been re-elected twice demonstrates that whatever happened in the 2014 election is now been sort of superseded by two elections that there was no wrongdoing alleged or proven. But it's I think the open letter that was written by this Bengali, I don't know if he's a journalist or a sort of public intellectual, but he basically was saying that he was writing anonymously because he didn't want to get the usual phone calls and knocks on the door from Rahman's people if he were to put his name to this article. But he's saying these progressives who think that they are advancing progressive causes by backing Rahman's campaign and helping him get elected. They just don't know what you're getting yourself into. These people are responsible for the deaths of my relatives in Bangladesh. I mean, the networks that they leverage.
Yeah. Maybe not them personally, but the organizations that they network with.
The organizations linked to the East London Mosque. I mean, Rahman himself, of course, has not been. Rahman he has called the East London Mosque are extremely important and valued partner, which is responsible for delivering some of our services. He doesn't say what services they are, but the Tower Hamlets Council website does show that East London Mosque leadership, the chief executive, met with Rahman and his executive team not long before the election. They're in this Tower Hamlets partnership group with the Metropolitan Police and Queen Mary University, the Canary Wharf group. So, as I pointed out in my article, there aren't any Jewish or Christian or other faith organizations included in this partnership group.
Right. This seems a lot like what's happening in New York with Mamdani, Mayor Mamdani.
He referenced Mamdani recently. He said, because he had obviously a lot of what he does, he sets himself up as a classic sort of just socialist populist. He said he wanted to correct imbalances in power, and as well as meeting people's everyday needs. His latest offerings have been free tube and bus travel and the London Underground for low-income families, which he said he was inspired by Mamdani's free bus fares in New York. Ken Livingstone used to do this. The former mayor of London did a deal with Hugo Chavez in Venezuela once to cheap fuel oil for London buses for free bus travel for, I don't know, it was for. Obviously, Rahman's not the first to have tried a socialist, quite far left socialist in a capitalist economy and city, but he won't be the first or the last. It's more, what does he owe to people, and who does he owe it to? His position.
What choices does the average voter in the United Kingdom and policymakers have? What are they supposed to do?
It's interesting. There's been kind of a stunned silence since the May 2026 election. I mean, there was relative silence when Rahman got back in 2022, and people couldn't quite believe it. But now it's sort of, we're so far down the track with all of this. And obviously, good money has been thrown after bad with the taxpayer funding all of these continuous inspections and investigations and interventions. The answer is hard to see. There's a great concern that the example of Tower Hamlets could be replicated in boroughs across the UK, in places like Bradford and Kirklees and Oldham. There are sort of similar highly organised factions in those local authorities.
So how do we stop this from happening in other cities? in the United Kingdom and in the West in general?
First of all, the police have got to get their act together. The police in the UK were particularly cowed by a report that came out called the Macpherson Report, which called the police institutionally racist. This was after the racist murder of black youth Stephen Lawrence at a bus stop in Newham in South London, very near Tower Hamlets, actually. After that, we've had the woke capture of the institutions, the police, the judiciary, the schools, in terms of all of this concern about DEI and racism, Islamophobia, and so forth. It's really been up to our Muslim intellectuals who are non-Islamists, people like El Khamenei, who's written a book, The Perils of Nonviolent Islamism, saying that you've really got to confront your well-meaning reflexes and take a clear-eyed look at this. What do these people actually want? Listen to their ambitions for Sharia and for a caliphate, and deal with them accordingly. We need to just a massive public information campaign about Islamism. The Austrians and the Germans have got observatories on political Islam now. They're more advanced than the UK in actually identifying and tackling some of these subversive forces.
We should wrap it up pretty soon, but do you think that they should have similar observatories in the UK?
Certainly, the UK did the Muslim Brotherhood Review. It probably needs to do another piece of work on Jamaat-e-Islami. The majority of the mosques in the UK are controlled by the Deobandi movement, which is a South Asian, anti-colonial, anti-Western, sort of pro-caliphate. Jules Gomez recently wrote a piece about the Muslim Police Association, talking about trying to debunk the whole idea of Islamist extremism or Islamism per se, as do all of the sort of Islamist-aligned groups. Right. So I think the police, the Electoral Commission, central government need to get very wise to some of these forces and the way they operate, and take a zero-tolerance approach to any breaches of electoral law.
Well, then that's going to be your job to write about in the weeks and months ahead. I think we should probably bring it to a close because I want to keep this short. I just want to remind people, go to Focus on Western Islamism's website and look at Hannah's pieces because they are brilliant documentation about what's going on in Tower Hamlets. And unfortunately enough, it's relevant to what's happening to FWI's readers throughout the West and in particularly the United States and places like New York. And I want to thank you so much for this interview, and I look forward to more of your articles about this.
Okay, Sir.